When 32-year-old Natalie Isaac made the leap of faith to open her own pharmacy in Sydney, she knew it would be tough, but it's been even harder than she expected.
As a pharmacist, it's been pretty intense. Don't forget we had the rat test sort of fiasco that's still going on, and then we had the boosters that were brought back to 4 months. So that happened together. And then COVID, like every industry, has affected our staffing as well, which makes it really hard.
Like many pharmacy owners across Australia, Natalie Isaac is desperate to stock take-home COVID tests for her customers, but can't keep up with demand.
In terms of visits, it's honestly in the hundreds. When someone literally walks into our pharmacy, we know exactly what they're going to be asking for. We can just tell. And with phone calls, it's in the thousands. Like, our phones are literally off the hook. It's non-stop.
She's been waiting on stock to arrive since December.
Thank you.
We've gone through numerous suppliers. We've got back orders on different brands of the rat tests as well. So, if I have 1,000 on back order, just the other day I got 44 that came through.
Not too far from Natalie's pharmacy is a warehouse filled with take-home rapid antigen tests, imported by medical entrepreneur Greg Huff, who says logistics is the latest issue preventing his company getting tests onto shelves.
The problem is compounded by the fact that, we had planes sitting on Sydney tarmac last week that couldn't get unloaded because there wasn't the staff to unload them.
With the gold standard PCR testing system around the country crumbling, governments have been desperate to secure rapid tests.
There are 70 million Commonwealth purchases that have been made, and now over 200 million, including the states and territories, I'm advised, plus the very significant private acquisitions.
The rush to secure tests is so intense, retailers have claimed they've had orders cancelled, and some suppliers have claimed orders have been redirected to the federal government. In a letter exclusively obtained by 730, one Queensland supplier tells its customer, Queensland Rail, the federal government is using emergency powers to commandeer tests. The government says that never happened, and the claim is untrue. Greg Huff, one of the nation's biggest suppliers of RAT tests, says he finds it hard to believe any supplier would redirect existing orders to the government.
If Coles and Woolworths and the pharmacy groups, etc., are putting purchase orders in ahead of the government, then they will receive their products ahead of the government. The government has asked for priority, but we can't commercially do that.
He believes state and federal governments could have avoided supply issues if they'd been receptive to home testing sooner.
You can't turn around and say, well, we're going to bring 20 million of these in and stick them in a storeroom and hope that the government purchases. That's just not commercially viable. So once the government puts in the purchase orders, we get them to the government. Should the government have put in purchase orders earlier? Yes, without a doubt.
Greg Huff claims he spoke to senior government health officials about the need for take-home rapid antigen tests in August of 2020.
I was indicating to them that they would have problems with PCR testing, as I had seen it going on in other parts of the world with regards to timing, lines, etc., and the fact that it's not necessarily a good thing for people that have symptoms to be standing in lines and spreading the variants. They weren't that receptive at all at the initial start.
A spokesperson for the Federal Health Minister says they have no records of Greg Huff meeting Minister Hunt. Dean Whiting, who has been a long-time advocate for pathology innovation, says Greg Hunt was an early supporter of take-home tests but had difficulty selling the idea to the states.
Some of the states did agree to start looking at these tests. Some of the states, on the other hand, had banned them and were, totally against the use of these tests. And this then made it difficult for the suppliers and the manufacturers to actually put any faith in Australia as a market.
While the states and federal governments couldn't reach consensus throughout 2021, today the Prime Minister said some medical experts were also reluctant to back home testing.
Rapid antigen tests, I remind everybody, even as late as October and November, were not the recommended testing resource by our medical experts. They were not.
Meanwhile, manufacturers found markets elsewhere.
The signals that we'd been getting up until middle of December were that we're not really that interested in these tests. By then, the orders were already in for many months for the other countries.
Lumos Diagnostics is one of 2 Australian companies manufacturing rapid antigen tests that's now approved in Canada and the EU. But its CEO says a lack of infrastructure here meant they were forced to make the take-home tests in the US state of Florida.
And that was in response to, where we saw, the market in terms of its maturity and also the dynamics, the public health responses that were going on. So, we quite deliberately set up our manufacturing there, even though we are an Australian headquartered company.
Sam Lanyon hopes Lumos can soon join Queensland-based company Illum in manufacturing in Australia to support the supply lines.
When we look at rapid diagnostics and we look at point of care in general, yes, it would have been great to have those types of industries up and running quickly, but what I would say is that, Australians are pretty ingenious, and the likes of Illum and Lumos as well, sort of responding not just to the Australian needs, but also the global needs, is really heartening. And I hope that what we do now is we put down some really, really deep roots that we can build off.
Consumers, meanwhile, are paying through the nose for tests, with skyrocketing prices only likely to fall when the nation secures supply.
We don't know how long that would be, a week, a month, a year. But if supply is improved, the problem will go away.
With price gouging rife, the competition watchdog has started naming and shaming retailers caught exploiting consumers. But former ACCC Chairman Alan Fells says that can only do so much.
It's not a especially strong power. It's better that it's done than not done at all.
Back in southwest Sydney, Natalie Isaac is doing her best to keep the few tests she has in store affordable.
When we're making these decisions, we have to remember that it's affecting real people's lives. A daughter came in and her father was visiting his palliative wife in hospital and would sit, 6 hours with her at the hospital. And without these rat tests, he wasn't able to visit her. These stories or these people who really need it are sort of lost in all of that.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 730's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.